Bowie had an unmistakable sound and many unmistakable looks. To talk about his astonishing legacy tonight, Laurie Brown, host of The Signal on CBC Radio, Juno Award-winning musician Molly Johnson, Jeannie Becker, the former host of Fashion Television, and Jeff Melanson, the CEO of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. But before we get their take on Bowie, let's get Bowie's take on Bowie.
Still don't know what I was waiting for, and my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and
I had to be very exaggerated in the beginning to defy people to put me into a category so that would leave me room to work in. Then I wanted to present something that would really set people on the edge of their seats in terms of something they would either adore or really didn't like at all.
I'm afraid of Americans, I'm afraid of the world, I'm afraid I can't, never gonna fall for, walks beside me, walks on by. I've always loved the new thing. My whole life has been like that. Ever since I was a kid, I've always loved the new thing. I just live my life like that, that's all.
Well, there he is, David Bowie. You know, all day today we've been hearing people talk about David Bowie, what he meant to them. We've seen some great quotes. I want to use a couple of them to guide us through the conversation tonight, starting with this one from Rebecca Tucker from her column today in the National Post. It seems unfathomable that someone whose existence sat on a plane so far above their corporeal could simply, mundanely die. How do you describe his cultural significance? Laurie, why don't you start? You interviewed him half a dozen times.
The significance for me is that David Bowie just blew open the barn doors as to what pop music could be. He decided that anything out in the art world was fair game. And he was the one that taught me as a very young teenager that pop music could be about anything. And I could feel unsettled in listening to his music, and I could appreciate things. The topics he had were really tough topics, a lot of them, and it all was okay. David Bowie created a world where everything was okay, and you could feel like you were part of it.
Molly, you were a singer, are a singer, listening to him. What was his significance to you?
The way he impacted on so many different kinds of musicians, from classical musicians to country and Western artists. I mean, any artist you talk to, any musician, David Bowie is in their wheelhouse, somewhere in there. Just so impactful, so interesting, that he appealed and influenced so many different types of musicians and artists. And in this last record, it's a jazz record in a way. Mm-hmm. Stumbling into a club in New York and finding a bunch of jazz cats and taking those guys into the studio, and that's the new record. This is the record we have today. And
not out of place in jazz.
Not out of place.
Jeannie, fashion, big to you, big to him.
Big to him, but only because he wanted the music to look the way it sounded. He actually said that. He was a great performance artist, first and foremost, I think. I mean, that's what I think of him, even before I think of him as a musician. He studied the art of corporal expression. He studied mime in Paris.
He studied with the same teacher as Jeannie.
With the great Etienne de Croo.
Yes,
I mean, I never got past the invisible wall, but as for him. This was in the, I studied 73, 74, and all the kids, you know, in this wonderful little basement in the Bois de Boulogne were buzzing about, you know, how Bowie had been there a few years previously. He had an affair, a great relationship with the British performance artist Lindsay Kemp. And Lindsay was the one that introduced him to Japanese theater and that whole, you know, men playing female roles, and the great work of the Japanese designer Kensei Yamamoto, and that kind of costume really figured big with Bowie and his Aladdin Sane tour, even in the early Ziggy Stardust days. So he was all about dressing up and realizing the magical transformational possibilities of fashion.
You know, Jeff, some people are saying, Toronto Symphony Orchestra, like, what is this guy doing here? Now, you wanted to be here. So why did you want to be here?
Well, I think certainly David Bowie reimagined what was possible in music in many ways. Beyond, Ziggy Stardust and this incredible musical character through which anything was possible, also really reimagining what it was to present a concert. The whole idea of an arena concert in a way he created in 1983 around the Let's Dance concert. And certainly in 96, Telling Lies, the first music download in the history of the world. 350,000 downloads in 1996. So
that was the first one.
Very first one. An absolute pioneer, and certainly we at the TSO are about disruptive innovation and celebrating the great leaders and composers of the past. And he's a genius. He's a musical genius.
Do you rank him up there with the great composers?
I put him up there with the John Cages, with the Beethovens, with the Mozarts. Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Let me throw another quote up on the screen here. And this is from Eva Michon, the filmmaker, the Canadian filmmaker. "It's my first time being truly sad for the death of someone I didn't know, because I guess I felt he understood me. He was an alien." Something about how he allowed you to feel like an individual, that there was something about him and what he said and the way he acted that gave power to others.
He was like the king of the misfits. He created this huge club of everyone out there who felt like no one understood them, and they were on the outside, and they were confused about thoughts and feelings they had. And when your parents didn't get what you were into, David Bowie was there to say, everything you're feeling, everything you're thinking, even though it's really strange and you feel like an outsider or a misfit, it's all okay. And I think he created a club like that. And the weird thing is that it doesn't matter how much you are normal, quote normal, all of us inside feel like we're misfits somehow. And I think he roped us all in like that and made us part of his Lost Boys Club.
I think that the constant change that he presented to us, those constant transformations too, is the kind of thing that would give someone great hope too. I mean, never stay in one place for too long, always about evolving, always about presenting different facets of yourself and exploring different facets of your artistic expression. I think that was something that was very encouraging and inspiring to a whole generation.
But in fairness, there are many artists who try to be that voice, with their audience, and yet he seemed to take it as Rebecca Tucker was saying, to another plane. What was it about his abilities that he was able to do that? Jeff?
I think in a way it was being absolutely fearless and not seeing boundaries. And I think in a way, the way we package music, for example, we package it to sell it. So the difference between classical and jazz is actually not huge, and yet we framed it as such. And I think he could see past a lot of those limitations that we self-impose or our industry imposes on us.
You're agreeing on that, Molly?
I am. The industry will say, well, she's a Mavis Staples-like, or they always need another artist to describe that artist. It seems to be the only way the industry is able to figure out where to slot you. And of course, David was unslottable, right? If there's even such a word. It just is. I can imagine them being confounded by what he's going to do next. And how do you A&R? How do you help David Bowie choose the songs that are going to be on his record? Well, you just don't.
And God help you if you showed up to a concert dressed like he was in the last album, because you were going to be there like on all this color and everything, and you'd say, David Bowie, and he would come out in a tuxedo, and you'd go, oh, damn, I guess.
I was listening to, they were playing, of course, on radio stations all day today, different interviews with him, and there was one where he was talking about Change, the song Change, and he was saying that people always looked at him in terms of change. He felt they were looking at him in terms of the clothes he wore, that was change, where it was really his music that was changing because it was this continuous journey that he was on.
I think it was his whole evolution. As an artistic being, that's what was so great about him. He wasn't enslaved to one particular mode of expression or one particular discipline, and he was as much a fashion artist as he was a musical artist, as he was just an all-round performance artist.
One of the few artists that lived through the 70s and in the early days and survived disco. Like he actually moved through disco intact, which you can't say about the Stones, for instance. They got beaten down by disco. It's an interesting
Yeah, he certainly shook us out of the complacency of that era. You know, the 70s, we were coming out of, the late 60s, early 70s. It was a flower power, hippy-dippy thing. And he just his thing was just so much more powerful. I mean, the statements that he was making were just so enlightened in a way, and his play with gender, I think, most importantly, for the time, was shocking but exhilarating. He saw life as theater of gender, and it was all about that play that made his actions
always ahead of the curve on whatever that curve was. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more on David Bowie.
Just a wreck of my little China girl. I hear her heart.
Well, we're back now with some more thoughts about David Bowie, joined by Laurie Brown, Molly Johnson, Jeannie Becker, and Jeff Melanson. And Jeff, let me start with you. A personal thought on a day like this about David Bowie. What is it for you?
Well, one of my favorite David Bowie quotes is, "The future belongs to those who can hear it." And so I just say, let's all listen to each other, listen to our world, and listen to our own creative potential.
All right. Jeannie.
I was just always struck by Bowie's humanity, as much as he was illuminated in a sense, as much as he seemed as though he moved through stardust, there was something so down to earth about him. I remember meeting him in New York with his gorgeous wife, Iman, at his side at a fashion event, and just the lightness of the moment and the wit that he had, and what a true gentleman. Certainly the kind of hero that would never disappoint.
Molly.
There's something about an artist that makes art right till the bitter end. And the fact that he recorded this last album knowing what none of us knew, controlling his artful death to the end. I mean, they did not announce during the Golden Globe Awards because they didn't want to, they waited. He controlled that, and that beautiful piece of film and this great record, from right till the end, true to his art and making art right till the end, which I found just incredible.
Laurie?
It's like he wrote his own requiem.
Yes.
Which is, and in meeting him, exactly what you say, a gentleman. He was so kind and so open, so generous, so thoughtful and so giving. And I think if there's something about his personality that I got from meeting him that went into his work, it was an insatiable curiosity he had about everything. And I think he applied that to his own death as well, and that is in the record. So I think it's a never-ending, never-dying curiosity that made David Bowie who he was.
All right. I thank you all for sharing your thoughts on this.